6,046 people. That is how many men and women researchers followed in the Rotterdam study, measuring one thing above all else: how stiff the aorta, the main artery leaving the heart, had become. And that single measurement predicted who would go on to develop cardiovascular disease and who would die from it, independently of the usual risk factors your doctor checks at your annual physical. That analysis was published in 2024 in the Journal of Hypertension. Now, here is the part almost nobody tells you. When we talk about the aging heart, the organ that fails first, in a very large share of people over 50, is not the heart at all. It is the pipe, the artery wall itself. It stiffens quietly, year after year, and it does this whether your cholesterol is perfect, whether your weight is fine, and in many cases, whether your blood pressure readings still look acceptable on paper. Stiff arteries hammer the heart with every beat. They hammer the kidneys, and, as I will show you today, they hammer the brain in ways that are directly tied to memory decline. And here is what should make you sit forward in your chair. One of the levers that acts on the inner lining of those arteries is not a prescription, and it is not a $200 longevity supplement stack. It is a plain mineral salt, magnesium, dissolved in water, and it has been tested in a randomized, double-blind clinical trial published in the Journal of Hypertension in people who were already on blood pressure medication. That detail, already on medication, matters enormously, and I'm going to come back to it because it exposes something your prescription is not doing for you. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly how arterial stiffening works, why the number everyone watches on their blood pressure monitor is not the number that reveals it, and how to set up a 2-minute morning water routine correctly, because most people who try this get the form of the mineral wrong and absorb almost none of it. There is also one group of people who should never start this without a phone call first, and I will tell you exactly who they are. Here is precisely what you are getting today in order. First, which forms of magnesium actually dissolve and absorb in a glass of water, and the cheap, common form sold everywhere that mostly passes straight through you. Second, the exact 2-minute morning routine. Why water specifically, and why the timing is less important than the consistency. Third, the one group of people, and it is a specific medical category, who must not start any magnesium routine without talking to their doctor or pharmacist first. Fourth, the free question to ask at your next physical that reveals the true age of your arteries, which can be 10 or 15 years older or younger than your birthday, and which most doctors will not bring up on their own. And fifth, the common kitchen vegetable that works on the very same chemical pathway inside your artery lining and that in human studies has measurably lowered blood pressure within hours. Every one of those 5 is coming, and each one is specific enough to act on this week. If this kind of plain language breakdown is useful to you, take 1 second now and hit like and subscribe, because it genuinely helps this reach the people over 50 who need it. My name is Dr. Vitalis. On this channel, I read the cardiovascular and aging research so you do not have to, and I translate it into steps you can actually use. Everything I tell you today traces back to published, peer-reviewed work, and I will name the journals and years out loud as we go so you can verify every word. Let me describe someone for you. I will call her Eleanor, and she is a composite of a pattern that shows up over and over in adults her age. Eleanor is 63. She lives in Tucson, retired 2 years ago from 31 years as a school administrator, walks her dog most mornings, and considers herself healthy. Every year she goes to her physical, and every year she hears roughly the same sentence. "Your numbers look fine, Eleanor. See you next year." But if you actually lay Eleanor's blood pressure readings side by side across the last 6 years, something is moving. 6 years ago, her reading was 124/78, then 128/76, then 132/75. This year, 141/73. Now notice what is happening there, because this is the number I promised you. The one that matters more than the one everyone watches. The top number, the systolic, has climbed 17 points. The bottom number, the diastolic, has actually drifted down. The gap between them, what physiologists call the pulse pressure, has widened from 46 points to 68 points. A widening pulse pressure like that is one of the classic footprints of arterial stiffening. Here is why. A young elastic aorta stretches when the heart ejects blood, absorbs part of the force, and then recoils between beats, which keeps the top number moderate and props the bottom number up. A stiffened aorta cannot stretch. The full force of each heartbeat slams forward undampened, so the top number rises, and there is no elastic recoil between beats, so the bottom number sags. Eleanor's monitor was describing the wall of her aorta in plain arithmetic for 6 straight years, and nobody translated it for her. She felt nothing, because arteries do not have pain fibers in the way that lets you feel them stiffening. The first symptom she actually noticed was smaller and stranger. Standing up from weeding the garden one afternoon in March, the room tilted for 2 or 3 seconds. Then again in the grocery store in April. Stiff central arteries are worse at buffering the pressure swings that happen when you change position, so the brain briefly gets shortchanged. Eleanor mentioned the dizziness to her doctor, got a 15-minute appointment, and left with advice to stand up more slowly. The reason I am telling you about Eleanor is not that she is unusual. It is that she is exactly typical. Her story is the story of arterial aging in this country, invisible on a standard checkup, written plainly in numbers nobody reads, and progressing every year it goes unaddressed. And the research says the earlier chapters of that story are more modifiable than most people over 50 have ever been told. So let me show you the mechanism, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and you will understand exactly where a dissolved mineral fits in. Your arteries are not passive rubber hoses. The wall of an artery is layered living tissue, and the layer I want you to remember is the innermost one, the endothelium. It is a single layer of cells lining every blood vessel you own, and it behaves less like wallpaper and more like a chemical control room. A 2022 review in the Journal of Molecular and Cellular Cardiology lays this out clearly. The endothelium maintains the tone of your blood vessels by producing relaxing factors, the most important of which is a gas called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the signal that tells the muscle in the artery wall to relax, to stay supple, to open. When the endothelium makes enough of it, arteries behave young. When production falls, or when the nitric oxide gets destroyed as fast as it is made, arteries clamp down and over time remodel toward stiffness. So what destroys nitric oxide? In large part, oxidative stress. A 2018 review in the journal Vascular Pharmacology describes the arithmetic when reactive oxygen species, unstable molecules generated by inflammation, high blood sugar, smoking, and aging itself, outnumber your antioxidant defenses. They chemically neutralize nitric oxide and injure the endothelial cells making it. That imbalance is called endothelial dysfunction, and it sits upstream of both stiffening and plaque. This is the wrong organ reveal, fully unpacked. You were told to worry about your heart. The battle is actually being fought in a one-cell thick lining you have never been told exists. Now, where does magnesium enter? Magnesium is involved in the machinery of vascular relaxation, and here is the human trial I flagged at the start. In 2017, the Journal of Hypertension published a randomized, double-blind trial of oral magnesium supplementation in hypertensive women who were being treated with thiazide diuretics, a very common class of blood pressure pill. The magnesium group showed improved endothelial function and, remarkably, attenuated subclinical atherosclerosis, meaning the early silent artery wall changes were measurably blunted. Sit with that. These were women already taking blood pressure medication, and the mineral still moved the needle on the artery lining itself. Here is the part they skip. Thiazide diuretics are known to increase magnesium loss through the urine. So some of the very people being treated for blood pressure may be quietly running down the mineral their artery lining depends on. The pill manages the pressure number while the wall keeps aging. That is the gap this whole video lives in, and it is worth saying that researchers take this question seriously across the lifespan. A 2014 trial in the journal Nutrition, Metabolism, and Cardiovascular Diseases went so far as to study magnesium supplementation in healthy young men whose only risk factor was a family history of metabolic syndrome, looking at blood pressure and endothelial function before any disease had appeared. Now think back to Eleanor. A widening pulse pressure, a stiffening aorta, and endothelium making less nitric oxide every year. Nobody measured her magnesium status. Nobody discussed her artery lining at all. The mechanism worked on her silently, exactly as it is working right now in millions of people whose checkups also look fine. Let me show you how differently this same mechanism can dress itself with 3 more composites, because one of these 3 may be sitting in your chair. First, Frank. Frank is 68, a retired machinist outside Dayton, Ohio. Frank has taken a thiazide diuretic for 11 years, and his blood pressure chart looks like a victory. 128/76 at his last 3 visits. His doctor is satisfied. Frank is satisfied. But Frank is the living profile of that 2017 Journal of Hypertension trial population, a long-term thiazide user whose urine has been escorting magnesium out of his body for over a decade, and whose endothelium has never once been discussed in an exam room. His pressure is controlled. His artery lining is another question entirely, and no one is asking it. Frank also gets calf cramps at night, 3 or 4 times a month, which he blames on age. Low magnesium is one of several possible contributors to cramping like that, and for a man in Frank's position, it is at minimum a reason to have the magnesium conversation with the doctor who prescribes his diuretic. Second, Diane. Diane is 57, a real estate agent in Savannah, and Diane will tell you accurately that her blood pressure is normal, 118/74. Textbook. What Diane has never had is any assessment of her vascular age. This is a real, measurable concept. Researchers in Hungary, in studies published in 2021 in Heart, Lung, and Circulation, and again in 2023 in the Journal of Clinical Medicine, compared standard risk calculators against vascular age derived from pulse wave velocity, which is a direct measurement of how fast the pressure wave travels down your arteries. Stiffer artery, faster wave. And the striking finding is that these methods do not always agree. A person can look average on a standard risk score, while a pulse wave measurement tells a different story about the arteries themselves. This is not fringe science. A 2013 review in the journal Pulse notes that stiffness of the large arteries has emerged from longitudinal epidemiological data as an independent predictor of cardiovascular risk. Independent, meaning it adds information the usual numbers miss. Diane's arteries could be 57 years old, or they could be 69, and nothing on her current chart can tell her which. Third, Walter. Walter is 74, a retired postal supervisor in Spokane, and Walter's worry is not his heart at all. It is the word finding lapses, the name that will not surface at dinner. The reason Walter belongs in this video is a 2021 review in Nature Reviews Nephrology, which lays out how high blood pressure compromises the brain's microcirculation and the blood-brain barrier, significantly raising the risk of vascular cognitive impairment and of Alzheimer's disease. The brain is downstream of the arteries, and it is exquisitely sensitive to the hammering of a stiff arterial tree. And the science here is getting sharper. A 2025 study in the journal Aging Cell showed that in mice, aged senescent endothelial cells in the brain's microcirculation, those same lining cells we have been talking about, drive blood-brain barrier breakdown, loss of small vessels, and impaired coupling between brain activity and blood flow, the plumbing failures linked to cognitive decline. Mouse data, so hold it loosely, but it points at the same one-cell thick layer. Frank, Diane, Walter, Eleanor. A medicated man, a normal woman, a worried mind, a widening pulse pressure. 4 faces, 1 mechanism, and every one of them can act on what comes next. Here is exactly what to do in this order. Item 1. Get the form right, because this is where most people fail before they start. Magnesium supplements are not interchangeable. The form matters for one simple reason. A mineral your gut does not absorb cannot reach your artery lining. The cheapest and most common form on drugstore shelves is magnesium oxide, and it is generally poorly absorbed. A substantial portion of it simply transits your gut, which is why oxide is often what is used when the goal is a laxative effect rather than raising your body's magnesium. For a dissolved morning drink, look instead at forms that dissolve readily and are generally better absorbed. Magnesium citrate is the classic example, and magnesium glycinate is a well-tolerated alternative for people whose stomachs are sensitive. Read the label and note the elemental magnesium amount, which is the actual mineral content, not the total compound weight. I am deliberately not giving you a milligram prescription because the right amount depends on your diet, your kidneys, and your medications, which is exactly why Item 3 exists. Item 2. The routine itself. 1 glass of water, roughly 8 ounces, first thing in the morning or with breakfast. Stir in the magnesium, let it dissolve fully, and drink it. 2 minutes, start to finish. Why water and why dissolved? Because absorption in your intestine is not passive soaking. It is active, transporter-driven work. As an illustration of how precise that machinery is, a 2020 study in Scientific Reports showed that even the fluid-absorbing power of an oral rehydration solution depends on its exact glucose concentration acting through a specific sodium-glucose transporter. Your gut is a chemistry lab, not a sponge. A fully dissolved mineral in a modest volume of water gives that lab the easiest possible job, and splitting intake, or taking it with food, is gentler on digestion for many people. And understand this clearly. The timing is not magic. Morning simply welds it to a habit you already have. Consistency over weeks is what a slow tissue like an artery wall responds to, not any single heroic glass. Item 3. And this is the promise about who must not start.
If you have chronic kidney disease or any meaningful reduction in kidney function, do not begin any magnesium supplement without your doctor's explicit sign-off. Healthy kidneys excrete excess magnesium efficiently. Impaired kidneys may not, and magnesium can accumulate to genuinely dangerous levels in that situation. The same phone call first rule applies if you take medications that interact with magnesium or with mineral absorption, certain antibiotics, some osteoporosis drugs, and others. Your pharmacist can check this against your full list in 5 minutes, free. And for everyone, loose stools are the common early sign you have taken more than your gut wants. That is your signal to back off and talk to your doctor. Item 4. The free question at your next physical. Ask this, word for word. Can we assess my arterial stiffness or my vascular age, for example, with a pulse wave velocity measurement? You now know why this matters. The Rotterdam analysis in the Journal of Hypertension showed aortic stiffness independently predicts cardiovascular events and death, and the Hungarian comparison studies showed vascular age can diverge from what standard risk scores imply. Not every clinic has the equipment, but the question itself changes the conversation. It tells your doctor you are asking about the wall of the artery, not just the pressure inside it. Bring your last 5 years of blood pressure readings and look at the pulse pressure trend together, the way we did with Eleanor. That costs nothing. Item 5. The kitchen vegetable on the same pathway. Everything we have discussed funnels through nitric oxide, and there is a second, entirely food-based route into that pathway, dietary nitrate. Beets and leafy greens like spinach and arugula are rich in it, and your body converts that nitrate toward nitric oxide. This is measured human physiology. Work published in the journal Nitric Oxide in 2023 found that blood pressure fell after acute dietary nitrate ingestion, in step with rising nitric oxide-related compounds in red blood cells. And a 2024 paper in the same journal reported that nitrate supplementation increased nitric oxide availability, reduced blood pressure, and even improved muscle contractile function. So, a practical week looks like this: magnesium in the morning water and a serving of beets or a generous handful of leafy greens most days. 2 different doors into the same room, the room where your artery lining decides how old to behave. Now, one bonus move, and almost nobody over 50 uses it, even though it costs nothing and takes 30 seconds. Track your morning resting heart rate. Before you get out of bed, 2 fingers on your wrist, count for 30 seconds, double it, write it down. Why? Because a 2009 review in the journal Heart Rhythm concluded that an elevated resting heart rate is an independent risk factor for cardiac mortality, a window into the autonomic nervous system's grip on your entire cardiovascular system. It is a free, daily biomarker sitting in your wrist. What you are looking for is not any single number. Single readings are noisy. You are looking at the trend across weeks. A resting rate that drifts steadily upward is worth bringing to your doctor with your written log in hand, which transforms a vague complaint into data. 2 caveats. If you take a beta blocker or certain other heart medications, your rate is pharmacologically lowered and the trend is harder to interpret. Log it anyway, but interpret it with your doctor. And this is a monitoring habit, not a diagnostic tool. It earns you an earlier, smarter conversation. Nothing more.
Fold it into the same 2 minutes as the morning glass, and you have built a tiny daily vascular check-in from things that cost you nothing. If you take one thing from this entire video, take this.
The Rotterdam analysis followed 6,046 people, and the stiffness of one artery predicted who lived and who did not, independent of the numbers on a standard checkup. Arterial aging is silent. It is written in a widening pulse pressure that nobody translates, and it reaches all the way to the brain. And yet the lining where that battle is fought responds to things as humble as a dissolved mineral tested in a double-blind trial, a plate of greens with measured effects on blood pressure, and a doctor's appointment where you finally ask the right question. This week, that means 3 moves. Check the form on any magnesium bottle before you buy. Make the phone call first if your kidneys or your medication list require it. And pull your last 5 years of blood pressure readings and look at the gap between the top and bottom numbers. Now the necessary plain truth. This video is education, not medical advice. Eleanor, Frank, Diane, and Walter are composites built to illustrate published patterns, not real patients. Magnesium may help many people and is not right for everyone. Nothing here is a promise of any outcome, and your own physician, who knows your kidneys, your prescriptions, and your history, is the person to clear any change with before you start. Please have that conversation. If this was worth your 25 minutes, hit the like button and subscribe, because every subscriber helps this channel reach one more person over 50 whose checkup says fine, while their arteries say otherwise. If someone you love takes a diuretic or has watched their top number creep for years, send them this video. I will see you in the next